Today is Thursday, January 16th, 2003, and this is the beginning of an interview with Robert Lee Rice. Mr. Rice was born on December 15th, 1946, and is now 56 years old. My name is Michael Willie, and I will conduct this interview. Mr. Rice, could you state for the recording your full name and its spelling, please?
Robert Lee Rice, R-I-C-E, Rice.
And during which war did you serve?
I served during the time of the Vietnam conflict.
Okay. And in which branch of the service?
I was in the Army.
Okay. And what was your highest rank attained?
E3.
Okay. Where were you born, Mr. Rice?
I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay. And tell me about your family. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I had an older brother and sister who were older than I was, but I had a younger sister. She and I, we was raised up around the same time.
Okay. All right. Now, let's see. Were you raised in Chattanooga? Were you born in Chattanooga and lived here your life until you?
Born and raised right here in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
All right. So, at what age did you join the service?
I joined the service about age 17.
Okay. And why did you join?
Well, I joined because I didn't have a high school education and didn't have a trade, and I thought maybe the Army was the way to go to be able to better myself.
Okay. So, let's see, 17, so you're probably 63, something like 1963?
When I joined was 1965.
1965.
Right.
Okay. So at that time, Vietnam really isn't a thought in the American mind, is it?
It wasn't in my mind. No.
Okay. All right. You looking forward to the challenge of the service, or was this just kind of an out for now?
Was I looking for a challenge, you said?
Were you looking forward to the challenge, or was this basically joining the service?
My older brother was in the Army.
Okay.
So I think because of him,
okay,
I had a passion to want to go into the Army.
Okay.
Because of him. But I figured it would also better me, you know.
Right, right. Okay, so you joined the Army, and where do you go for basic training?
I went in Fort Gordon, Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, where it was.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And what was basic training like for you?
It was an experience. I look back on it now with fond memories. I wasn't active when I was in school, and I couldn't do a lot of push-ups, and did very little running, no more than playing maybe baseball with the fellas. But other than that, I wasn't into sports or anything. So therefore, it was a little rough in basic training, and plus I was overweight when I went to basic training. But toward the end of basic training, I was pretty fit. Had a sergeant named Sergeant Coffee, was his name, and he stayed on me and just stayed on me, and but he got me to a point to where I needed to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Around what time of year was this when you were in?
It was around January, February. By the time I got to February, by the time I got to basic training, it was cold in Augusta.
I was going to say you weren't in Augusta for the heat of the summer.
No. It was quite warm.
All right. So how long are you in basic training at this point? Or how long?
Basic training was like 2 months.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, before you left Chattanooga, was there a special girl where you?
Yeah, I was married by the time.
Oh, you were married.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you go to Augusta, and then you finish up basic training.
Yes.
And where do you go from there?
From there, they put me in AIT training.
Okay.
Yeah, but see, I wanted to be a chaplain's assistant, and they said they had lost my records. But in the meantime, they put me in this pre-airborne AIT training.
Okay.
It's pre-airborne infantry training.
Okay.
So I stayed there another 2 months in Augusta, which was more rigorous training.
Right.
I even lost more weight, got really physically fit because we ran everywhere we went.
But you feeling pretty good about yourself at this?
Oh yeah. I really had a positive attitude about myself.
Okay. Now, explain what is the job of airborne infantry, or what is airborne infantry?
Well, he's an infantryman on the ground, and what happens with this pre-airborne AIT training means It gives you an insight of airborne training without the airborne training. It gives you the infantry part with access on
Gotcha.
on airborne training, because when you did push-ups, when you got through, you said airborne. When they count your officers in fives, when you go to chow, you had to say 1 airborne, 2. Everything was airborne. Now, upon completing pre-airborne AIT training, then they would try to prompt you into going to jump school.
Okay.
The job of the infantryman is to fight on the ground. The airborne trooper is to be dropped out of the air
And then fight
on the ground. Right.
Okay. So, were you looking forward to a challenge of jumping out of airplanes?
No, that wasn't my plan, because they had lost my records.
Right.
And I was put in pre-airborne training, and I didn't ask to go there.
Okay. So you were still looking to chaplain.
Right.
Right. Okay. So, how long are you at in airborne pre-airborne training now?
That was 2 months.
Another 2 months. All right. And then what do you do at the end of this 2 months?
From there, I was shipped to Fort Riley, Kansas.
Okay. And what's that for?
Fort Riley, Kansas, where they put me in the 1st Infantry Division.
Okay.
It was 1st of the 26th Infantry.
Okay.
And I brought up the fact that I did not come into the service to be an infantryman, that I wanted to be a chaplain's assistant. Okay, so for a while there, they put me in 5th Army, which was up on main post of Fort Riley. And for another 2 or 3 months, I was a firefighter on the airfield. Now, in other words, I worked with the fire department. Right, on the airfield there. And I had firefighters training, where we train in the suit to fight a fire, learn how to put down foam on a runway and stuff like that. And then I came down on levy, and the levy was to go to Vietnam, because everybody was shipping out from there to go to Vietnam. The 1st Infantry Division was.
Out of Fort Riley?
Out of Fort Riley, Kansas.
Okay.
This was in '65.
Okay.
And then from there, I came down on levy to go back to 1st Division. But this time it was the 1st Division, the 28th Infantry.
Okay. All right. So, how are you feeling about these orders?
Well,
Thinking
I
that you were gonna-
really didn't
Yeah, okay. Did you
Didn't
know anything
know.
about Vietnam?
I didn't know. Didn't have a clue about Vietnam or
Okay.
what it was going to be like, what it was like. We were all young together there,
Right.
and nobody knew.
Okay. But it wasn't like it was in the later '60s about the war, the protests, and people.
No, at that time there wasn't any of that.
Okay. All right. So, tell me about when. Are you able to go home at any point?
Yes, I went home for 19 days. Then after the 19 days, then I was shipped over to Vietnam.
Okay. What'd you do your 19 days home?
Oh,
Show off
we
your uniform.
well we
People poke your belly?
my wife cried because before I was a different person. I looked different from when I first went in, and she thought that I had really been treated bad to be able to trim down that way.
Right.
But the home being at home was nice.
Right. But you're pretty
Right.
proud of yourself at this time, right?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
most definitely. I'm proud of myself because of I can run 5 miles now. I could never run 5 miles before.
Right.
Never had to run even 1 mile, but I could run 5 or 6 miles at this time. I can do 50, 60 push-ups, whereas before, when I first came into basic training, I could only do 1 push-up.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, at this point, do you have an idea that you're still wanting to be a chaplain's assistant?
Yes.
Is it chaplain's
Chaplain
assistant?
assistant.
And are you thinking at any point now, this might be career, this might be, what I want to do?
Yes, I knew that I was a minister of God before I ever went into the service, that He had called me to preach, and I'm a minister now. But I knew that I didn't have the educational background,
Right.
so that's why I went into the service
Okay.
too.
Okay, so
Right.
this is actually just a good opportunity
Right.
for you to get that training.
To get that training right.
Gotcha. Okay. So you go home for 19 days, and then you go back to Fort Riley? Is that where you...
I catch a hop out of, there's an Air Force base between Chattanooga and Nashville. I had 5 days of leave, and I had 4 days of traveling time. I took 18 days leave, 1 day traveling time, and turned myself into the Air Force installation, which I got a hop from out of Tennessee. I think it's Murfreesboro, and went on to Travis Air Force Base, and then from there I got processed and went on to Vietnam.
Okay.
To 1st Division, 1st of the 28th Infantry.
Okay. Now, what, so you have kind of an idea of what, when you get off the plane at Vietnam, what's that like? What's your
It
feeling?
was horrible. First of all, when I left to go over, it was cold.
Uh-huh.
I left to go over 1965, December, the 24th day.
Day before Christmas?
Day before Christmas.
How we doing?
There was only about a 12-hour flight or 13-hour flight.
Mm-hmm.
Crossed the international date line, arrived 12 or 13 hours later in Vietnam on the 26th. So therefore I missed Christmas Day all totally, you know. That was mind-blowing. Had heard about the international date line in school, but until you experience, there's no relevance.
Right, right.
So, but when I got to Vietnam, and you know, the plane is the pressure in the plane, you still had to, you know, still cool.
Uh-huh.
But when they opened the doors, the heat of Vietnam rushed, and it felt like it was choking me, and I thought, I'm not gonna make it.
Right.
Yeah. But when I got off and the smell of the country, I think for about 2 or 3 days I couldn't even eat. We landed in Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base. At that time, 90th Replacement, which is a processing center in Vietnam, which directed you which way you would go, was in Tan Son Nhut. And to see the Vietnamese people in those black pajamas, the ladies, and they would chew betel nut to preserve their teeth, but at the time I didn't know what it was. Some of them teeth, the older ladies' teeth was black, and some was red in the smell, and I thought, man, what is this? You know, so
It's a whole new world.
It's a whole new world, yeah. Especially for a young guy. I think at that time I might have been 18.
Yeah. All right. So you go to the replacement center or
Yes.
replacement depot?
Yes.
At that point?
Tan Son Nhut.
Okay. And processing, I guess, and
Processing, yeah, getting your insurance papers together, and getting gear, getting uniforms, because you know the fatigues, you had to have summer fatigues and jungle boots, and getting prepared to go to your unit.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, while being in the 90th Replacement, there were guys coming in to go home, and this is when I finally realized that this is a war type situation, because of the horror stories they were telling, which really put a lot of fear in the ones who were just coming over.
Right.
You
And
know.
were they doing this? I mean,
They were doing this in preparing us,
Uh-huh.
telling us not to get too close to one another,
Uh-huh.
because if one of them get killed, one of us get killed, and you're real close, it can have a damaging effect.
Right.
So they're more or less like preparing you what you were going to be in for.
Right.
Yeah, and then from there I went to Phuc Vien. Phuc Vien, that was the name of it. Phuc Vien at that time had probably only been set up for maybe about a year, so therefore we lived in tents. It was our base camp. It was the 1st of the 28th Infantry base camp. Phuc Vien was.
Okay. All right. So, and how do you get there?
We get there by choppers.
Okay.
And that's helicopters.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you're with how many replacements being sent there?
Probably 30.
Okay. All right. Anybody who you've come to know? Anybody that?
Not at that time, no, because see, they might be. That was the 1st of the 28th Infantry, but then still they had a helipad there, and there was other companies there, so we were all split up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So you end up with your division.
Right.
And then what's that like? Your first impression when you're introduced, when you meet them?
Well, they tell you what to expect and who you're going to be with and what you're going to do and how we do it. I was issued a weapon, and I got to know this guy who was a Filipino. I never knew his name, but you know, you have to depend on somebody. So he and I got pretty tight.
Mm-hmm.
He had already been there. one guy that I knew in particular, Sergeant Poole, he became a good friend of mine also. So I learned what's to be expected, and from there I started going out on maneuvers.
Okay. Now, your unit, had they been through a lot before this point, or are you dealing with a lot of guys who are big time battle tested, or? They
had been through some, maybe not a whole lot.
Right.
During the time when I got there, there was an operation that was called Operation Crimp. It made Newsweek, 1966. But we went out on different sweep maneuvers, and during this time was when, I guess around January 20th, we was in a place called Coochie. And I've only been there maybe almost a month, or pretty close to a month. And we were clearing for the 25th Division. By this time, I have seen people die. When I really realized about combat was when I saw an NBC cameraman get killed.
Really?
Yes. And then I knew then for sure that I was in a combat situation, whereas before I thought maybe this is another training exercise.
Right.
But when I saw this NBC cameraman stand up to take pictures, and then he slumped over, and I thought, well.
Well, now, when you say you're doing maneuvers, then basically what are you doing?
You are sweeping the area of the enemy. It's like playing chess. You acquire an area and you call that area safe, but it's not safe. But that's what you call it, safe. You rid the area of the enemy. If he has a stronghold there, you would engage him in battle, defeat him, or you would fight long enough until you defeated him and push him out of that area. And then we would hold that area for a certain length of time. The thing about it, they would come back in behind us and reclaim the area.
Right.
You know.
The only place that was secure is where you are.
Yeah, and even that's not secure.
Right.
We come to find out that around Michelin Rubber Tree Plantation, around in Coochie area, where we was clearing for the 25th Divisions, the first time that I knew that we found underground tunnels. That's where you get the name tunnel rats. All the guys who were short would be picked to go, who had the courage to do it, would be picked to go in these tunnels and find out where they would go. That was one time I was glad I was not a small guy.
Yeah.
They would have a 45 and a flashlight, and they go on these tunnels. And this is where we found that they had double-deckers hospital. They would go far up under the ground. And we also found at this time that they had 2-mile long tunnels. And these tunnels had been dug during the time when the French were there. And that's probably how they defeated the French.
Right. Now, are you, in Coochie, are you dealing with North Vietnamese Army or the Viet Cong or both?
Basically Viet Cong, but I'm really not sure if it was NVA or not also, because a lot of times when we would fight, sometimes we wouldn't see them, and we know we'd have people that we've killed, them, and then when we go in to do a body count, they would be gone.
Right.
And what was happening was they would pull them into these different tunnels, and that's where they would stack the bodies, or there was also hospitals in those tunnels too. Right. But we didn't know that at the time.
Okay.
And during this Operation Crimp, the 27th of January of 1966 is during the time when I got wounded. Like I said, we was clearing for this particular area to be the 25th Division's base camp.
Okay.
And that day, we had what we called a bad luck company, and that was Company C. Seemed like they would always get the blunt or the worst part of the action. And it was around 4 in the afternoon, and Company C went in to clear an area. But when they went in to clear this area, it was either Viet Cong or NVA had a stronghold, but they had set a trap. And they was in L-shaped bunkers, and these bunkers were like maybe a foot high off the ground. And from there, the tunnels that's where they could escape to the tunnels. And Company C walked up into this L-shaped trap, and they got annihilated. So we went in to pull them back out, the dead and the wounded. Well, the wounded really, we had to leave the dead because there was so much firepower being laid down. And then they called in an A1E strat, and these A1Es are not jets, they are props, but they got a lot of bombs on them. And they did an airstrike. And as they were doing the airstrike, when those bombs would hit, it would just shake the ground real bad. It shake it so bad it just shake the leaves off the trees, you know. And shrapnel would fall. I remember this one time lighting a cigarette because the shrapnel had fell right next to me, which is a piece of the bomb. Was so hot. It was so hot that I couldn't even get my cigarette close enough to light it. But that's how hot. When the shrapnel was falling everywhere, and I figure a lot of the guys were wounded by the shrapnel.
How big is the shrapnel when it comes on?
Shrapnels can be from very small to very large. The largest piece of shrapnel I've seen may have been 7, 8 inches, real rugged piece of iron, torn, twisted, and hot. Yeah.
All right. So bad luck company, go ahead.
Right. So we pulled them out and we called in this strat. And when the strat leave, it is total silence. Can't hardly hear anything. And I come to command to order us to go in to make sure that the enemy is killed. During the strike, the enemy goes up on the ground. And he comes back up in these foot-high bunkers, which are off the ground. And we walk back into that same trap.
Oh, man.
And during this time is when I got shot.
Where'd you get shot?
I got shot in the hip. And the bullet came out of my left buttocks. And I got shot in the left hip. At the time when I got hit, a lot of people say, does it hurt? Well, it was like somebody hitting you with their fist. That's the way it felt on my hip. But when I was shot, I went into slow motion. Between the time I was hit and the time that I fell to the ground seemed like it took 5 minutes. And I was thinking, I need to hurry up and get to the ground before I get shot again. And when I hit the ground, then time comes back to normal. In other words, it's not slow anymore. And I roll over, and I cannot move my left leg. And with how your jungle clothes are, it looks like I had been, probably my leg had been shot, severed, because I couldn't move it. That was the thought I had in my mind. And I rolled back over, and I looked at my weapon. My weapon had been shot in too. And at that time, I carried an M14E2AR. It's an M14 with a pistol grip right up under the trigger housing, and it also has this tripod at the end of it, so you can sit down and really do fire. Right. And I don't remember calling for the medic, but anyway, I know the medic did come, eventually did come. And everybody they was hitting seemed like they were hitting around the chest, between the chest and the knees. I don't know if that was because of the position they was in, but it seemed like a lot of guys, especially this one guy named Sanders, he was hit in the leg, and the bullet came out of his back, his upper back. I mean, I guess the bullet ricocheted. So the medic came over, and he pulled my pants down. Now we didn't wear underclothes because you couldn't. Sometimes we would go a couple weeks without being able to bathe. So to wear underclothes was just really impossible. You would get that what they call jungle rash. So he pulled my pants down and he said, Rice, he said, you okay? You're just only shot in the butt. But he didn't realize I was shot in the hip. I didn't know I was shot in the hip. I was just glad to the news that I was shot in the butt. And I didn't realize that I was charging from the front when I got hit. To think about it. It couldn't have got me in the butt if somebody behind shot me in the butt. So he left me his 45. This was one of the medics. And when he left and I laid there and bled, and then I began to hurt real bad, and I began to think, well, maybe I'm not gonna make it because I'm still being shot at. I was out on what they call the left flank. So whoever this is on my left, enemy on my left, is still shooting at me, you know. And it was a fierce battle. I mean, the noise and guys crying for their mothers and crawling around on the battlefield just hollering without their weapon. I mean, and
could you see what was going on at this time, or were you just looking up?
Yeah, I could see because we wasn't in a flat area. Some of it was kind of not hilly, but high enough to see. Like I could see down above the bushes where I was to see the scene that I'll always remember that sticks in my mind is seeing this one guy. His helmet, he didn't have his helmet on and he didn't have his weapon and he was just crawling. He had been hit. And he was literally calling for his mother. And the agony of that, and then plus the agony that I had been shot, it was just too much to bear. And then, like I said, I was still bleeding from my hip. And the pain was unbearable. Then I began to get cold, and cold enough till I was trembling. And I just thought, well, you know, I don't think I'm going to make it out of this experience. But I still would look up periodically to make sure nobody was coming up on me. The enemy wasn't coming up on me. And I could still hear my company commander still telling guys to get up and charge these bunkers, and they were dropping like flies. So during this time, as I'm hurting, I figured that I'm not going to make it. And I said, well, I will accept death. You know, normally whatever you're doing, if you're swimming and you're about to drown, you fight death to try to live. You're always fighting to survive. At this time, I had given up survival. I just thought, well, I'm going to die.
Just go to it.
So, hey, if I'm going to die, and like I said, I was a Christian at that time, I just said, Lord, hurry up and come on and get me, because the pain is unbearable and I'm cold because of the loss of my blood. And as I gave up to die, laying there thinking that I was on my way to heaven, a man came and sat down beside me. And this man was not in the war with us. And the man talked with me without moving his mouth. I could see through him, but still, I could still see him. And he sit there like he was sitting on a stump. And he was reading. Now, at this time, when this man sat down beside me, I began to get the best peace I ever had in my life. Never had that kind of peace since that particular time. And the peace I had was like, everything is all right. Everything's going to be fine. And I wanted more of this peace.
Was the pain subsided?
The pain had gone away. There was no pain. I could barely hear the bullets and the guys crying. I thought at that time I was coming to death, really what it was. And I had given up to die. But like I said, in the midst of all this confusion, laying there bleeding with my pants down, I had this peace. And this man sit there, and as this man sit there and talk with me without moving his mouth, he reminded me of the good times back home. I was born and raised over here in this area of Erlanger Hospital. And there's a park called Lincoln Park. I practically grew up in Lincoln Park. And he brought back all those good times of swimming in Lincoln Park and being with the fellas when I was a kid coming up. And I thought to myself, yeah, those were good times. But this peace that I have now, I want this. And then he brought up my mom and my dad, my sister, and friends and relatives. And I thought, yeah, that's good to think about them. But I still wanted this peace. And then he brought up to me my wife. We had only been married then not even a year. And I thought to myself, well, I really don't want to leave my wife. And then this man tells me that I'm not. He says, you're not going to die. He assures me that you're not going to die and you're going to live. And at the minute that he assures me that I'm going to live, I start fighting for life. He disappears. The pain come back. The noise come back. Now this whole time I never lost consciousness. But the agony of life come back. And
I'm going to stop tape real quick.